Welcome to the Astro Psyche. This is your weekly astrology forecast for June 30th through July 6th. And there's some unexpected, innovative, very change-making energy this week. We have Venus making an aspect to Uranus. We have a first quarter moon in Libra, and Venus, the ruler of Libra, is making several different aspects in addition to Uranus. So we're going to talk about all of those things. I think this week there's this theme of being open to new things, being open to change, being open to just divergent different kinds of experiences, and especially within the Venusian realm of relationships, beauty, aesthetics, money, and our values. My name is Shauna McGrath. I'm a depth psychotherapist and an astrologer, and I'm so honored to share the astrology of this week with you from a depth psychological perspective. So, first things first, we are within the waxing, growth-oriented, extroverted phase of the lunar cycle. So this week we will have our first quarter moon in Libra on Wednesday, July 2nd. It's exact at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. So it may be Wednesday or Thursday, depending on where you are in the world. And so the first quarter moon marks this point of moving more deeply, more concretely, more committedly into whatever it is that you're creating or whatever it is that you're committing yourself to. The moon is so connected to growth and our emotional processing, and it really is connected to the cycles of growth in nature. And so for us, there's this, we can think of growth as being more out in the world, being more active, and really feeling and thinking and just interacting with people. And so the first quarter moon marks this moment of sometimes needing to make decisions, sometimes needing to decide how we're going to divert or channel our energy. And in this case, it's in the sign of Libra. So we have the sun in Cancer. The sun being in Cancer, this quality of a conscious focus on emotional nurturance, of caretaking, of holding space, of community, of the feeling function within us. Cancer is also this very protective quality. It is a fierce protective kind of symbol. And then when we have the moon in Libra is a symbol of wanting things to be peaceful, easeful, balanced, wanting to find a state of equanimity, wanting to make sure that everyone has the things that they need. And so this combination, it feels to me as though maybe there's a bit of a possible emotional challenge around how to do the things that you need emotionally, and then how to meet the needs of others, how to find a balance, or maybe a way where it doesn't have to be quite balance, isn't quite the word always. Sometimes it's more of just finding logistically a path forward where all of the pieces fit. And when we have the moon in Libra in general, whether that's like now with the first quarter moon in Libra, or it's a full moon or a new moon, or you have the moon in Libra in your birth chart, I think it can be really important to make sure that there is a checking in with oneself as far as, okay, wait, first and foremost, how am I feeling? What am I feeling? What is sitting with me? What are my preferences? And then going out to assess what needs to be done. Because I think with Moon and Libra, because it is so relationally oriented and so other oriented, there can be a natural inclination to put the energy outwards, to put the sensory seeking, the assessment outwards, and then the checking in with the self can sometimes be forgotten or happen after the fact. And so I think that's something important to keep in mind. Now, another component of this particular first quarter moon is that it's happening when the sun in Cancer is making a square to the goddess asteroid Ceres. And so actually the moon is activating what we would call a T-square because the moon in Libra is opposite the asteroid Ceres, and then the sun is making a square to each of them. So there's this T shape that's happening. And Ceres is the goddess in Greek mythology who was the mother of Persephone. And so a part of the Ceres symbolism and the Ceres experience is the challenge of letting go, the challenge of allowing someone or something to continue to evolve and to take on its own life. And there's this experience of separation, and sometimes that can involve grief or feelings of emptiness or a void. And Ceres is also very connected psychologically to our identity and how, for example, with the identity of mother, when a child goes off into the world, there's an inherent change and transition in one's own role and identity. And this is, of course, always shifting and lifelong and happens over time. And with Ceres, it doesn't necessarily have to be about motherhood in particular, but we're taking the experience of motherhood and that separation of motherhood or parent. I think we could say parent or caregiver as well. Uh, that there are times in life where something that someone else does has an impact on the way that we experience the world, on our role, and how we identify in general. Sun, of course, the sun in astrology is connected to our ego. And so, this, while it's a very, I would say, brief and somewhat minor aspect, there's a high emotional volume to it because it is the moon and because we are in the emotional sign of Cancer. And so, I think just something to notice as far as how you feel about your identity and relationships and how you show up and what it means for you about who you are in connection to the people that you are interacting with or the people that you're in committed relationships with. There might be just something that's bubbling up here. And I think that so important whenever we have Ceres in connection to another planet to create some space for experiencing some of the more open, void like feelings, such as loss or grief or disappointment, or just feeling a sense, even if there is happiness with a situation, even there is a life, a major life event that is really exciting. Sometimes just the transition can bring up a feeling that maybe isn't quite sad or grief, but it's just there's an immensity to it. There's a lot of energy to it when we have change and transition, major life and change and transition. And so allowing that feeling to arise and to flow through you. We can think of working with the sun in Cancer as allowing for the cleansing flow of energy, that water is in constant motion and constant movement typically, um, and that there is something about this where we want to allow things to wash through us, and that creates often a sense of healing and even a flow state or a flow experience, whether that's being in the flow of life or being in the flow of you and yourself and what is happening in life. So those are some of my thoughts as far as the lunation cycle that's happening right now. And of course, the sun is still very close to Jupiter. And so we also have that bigness, that Jupiter being the planet of wanting more, wanting to include, wanting to also have this tone of social justice and wider perspective. And so I think that Jupiter adds in the quality of immensity to an experience, and then also being able to pull back and look at the wider perspective of things. And so I think that there can be something there also with looking at things from a broader perspective or maybe a more long-term view. Now, also what's happening this week is we have Venus in Taurus making a conjunction to Uranus. And so this is Venus and Taurus. When they conjunct, they are together at the same place in the zodiac. And so their symbolism, their energies are melding together and creating this unique flavor, this unique experience. In this case, it is a unique flavor of creativity and spontaneity and novelty and invigoration around beauty, aesthetics, relationships, relational dynamics, enjoyment, pleasure. And Venus is also very connected to, okay, so Venus is connected to the things that we're attracted to, the qualities, the things that move us, the things that draw us. And Venus is very like the moon, it tends to be in some ways somatic in that way where it's like, oh, yes, like I feel it. Like there's something that is invoked in you when you're drawn to something. And so Venus can point to these things that have an impact on us, the things that feel good, that feel pleasurable. And when we have Uranus coming into contact with Venus, there's an invigoration, there is a spontaneous quality, there is an unburdening. Now, of course, the challenging quality of Venus Uranus that can happen is where maybe something feels unstable or you're not quite ready for it. And I think that sometimes the unexpected, if it feels destabilizing, that can throw us off. And then we maybe have a challenging experience or it doesn't feel as grounded and rooted. And it can kind of feel sort of like and buzzy and I don't know if spacey is quite the right word, but it's more where things are happening so fast and we don't have the time or the space to process what's happening. And so I do find, well, okay, this is what I'll say. Uh, We've been really encountering and working a lot with Jupiter square Saturn over the last many months. And I think that Jupiter square Saturn can be sort of a pressure cooker kind of energy. Anytime that we have Saturn aspecting a planet, there's a certain weight and gravity to it. And I think that Venus to Uranus this week adds a little or maybe a lot of burst of energy, of vibrancy, of maybe something that has felt possibly stagnant or heavy or like it's just this week also kind of I was thinking of the feeling tone of clinging, and I was thinking about that with Ceres, with what was I thinking about? There's some other things I'll talk about, but I feel that Venus Uranus helps when we are psychologically, emotionally having an experience of something is sort of stuck in it's clinged on kind of way, where I keep getting this image of um, washing the dishes and there's something that's like really shellacked on there. And Uranus, because it is such a shock of energy, it can help with unsludging things, so to speak. And so I think that this is a great week for contemplating where it feels like there is something that is maybe being released, and not released in a way where you're like, um, I'm I'm pausing because I'm not a fan of saying release or cleanse or detoxify or uh, sort of this idea of exiling something from the psyche. I don't think it quite works that way. I think that, I mean, sometimes it does, maybe, I'm sure. But what I'm feeling is this release is more of an unstucking of something, and then almost like a gear. So maybe the gear can function in a way that's more fluid and smooth, and it doesn't cause as much grinding or agitation. I realize I'm throwing a few different metaphors in here, but I hope you're feeling into what I'm saying here. And so while Venus-Uranus can be unexpected or destabilizing, I think that because we have had some very stabilizing energy that we've been experiencing and are still experiencing, the Jupiter Saturn square is still in effect, even though it's dissipating. I think that there's something here that maybe feels freeing or rejuvenating or creative. Whenever we have Venus Uranus together, this is an aspect that is highly creative, highly innovative. There is this spark to it. And Uranus is also a symbol of when we just have something that just comes to us, whether we call it an insight or a light bulb moment or a download, things like this. And so this is all connecting in with the theme of relationships, relational dynamics, and our values, what we enjoy, what we find pleasure in. And so overall, this feels like a really beautiful time to be open to something new. And because Venus has been moving toward Uranus, I would imagine, I would guess that maybe you're already feeling into something that is emerging, whether it's something emerging from within you or something emerging in your sphere, in your life. There's some new kind of energy that's coming in here. And uh, I encourage you to notice what wants to come forward so that there can be this easeful opening, this easeful flow of whatever it is that wants to come out that can be birthed, so to speak. Now, Venus moves into Gemini this week also. So Venus in Taurus will make its conjunction to Uranus, and then it will move into Gemini. And it does this, let's see, Venus moves into Gemini Friday. Friday morning Pacific time. So Friday, July 4th, maybe the 5th, Saturday, depending on where you are in the world. And so this is Venus, the planet of relationships, etc., moving from a more fixed sign, Taurus, into Gemini, which is this mutable, fluid air sign. And so I like this Venus's conjunction to Uranus is a transitional point. It sort of feels like Uranus is a guardian of the gate, the threshold from Taurus into Gemini. And so we get this bursting open, where Venus has been in Taurus, especially several weeks ago, where Venus was far away from Uranus, it was in Taurus. There's this fixed, rooted groundedness around relational dynamics when we have Venus in Taurus. And so then Venus has been several weeks ago in this more rooted, fixed, developing sort of focus. And then Venus encounters Uranus and then moves into Gemini, and there's this breaking open, and then there's more fluidity, there's more movement, there's more, what do I want to say here? Venus in Gemini, there's more changeability to it. There's more capacity for flexibility. And so, of course, this might be in the way that you are showing up around people. It could also just be the way that you experience beauty and pleasure and the things that you enjoy in life. Um, because Venus also, oh, this is what I wanted to say here too. I sort of left the pathway of this. I started to tell you and describe to you how Venus is very connected to the things that we're attracted to. And the things that we're attracted to, in some ways, are connected to our values and what we value, what we appreciate, what we find substance in. And because of this, there is this connection with Venus around our experience of our own value, our own worth as a human being, and how we derive that value. Whether we derive that from something that is intangible or something that is a role or something that we do. And so this Venus, Uranus, and into Gemini, to me, also feels as though there's something about your sense of yourself. We could call this self confidence, we could call this self worth, we could call this um, your self concept. There's something here that is transforming and being being opened around your authentic experience of yourself in an authentic way of being, which is very Uranus. And so I quite like this for you. It feels as though there is something here that is shifting in a way that is maybe unexpected, that allows you to be more of yourself. And in contrast, maybe allows you to notice the ways where you have not been able to or aware to be yourself, where maybe there has been some conscious or unconscious masking that I think sometimes Uranus can denote a period in time where we have a really hard time masking, or it becomes intolerable or excruciating to mask in some way. And so there's an adjustment here that's happening. And so I think that it's nuanced and it's complicated. Masking, it's not something that is just like an on off switch typically. And so there's something here that's being reworked or retooled or remade. Now, when Venus moves into Gemini, it's also going to make a soft, supportive, subtle sextile aspect to Saturn and Neptune. And so this is something that we can take advantage of or not. It's not as in your face as a conjunction or a square. And I think that Venus making a sextile to Saturn and Neptune provides some perspective on what has happened earlier in the week and provides some perspective on whatever changes it is that you're going through or experiencing that unexpected. And so um, it feels to me like most of the week, Monday to Friday, there's a lot of energy churning and moving, and there's a lot of feeling. And I encourage you to feel all of the things and notice what's coming up for you. And then over the weekend, there's a bit of a feeling of integration where there's more space, perspective, a slowing down maybe of being able to process things and make sense of things. Now, also this week, a more subtle aspect is Mercury is making a square to the asteroid goddess Vesta. And so this is Mercury in Leo making a square to Vesta. And Mercury, we know, is going to be in Leo for a while. It's going to be there for a couple of months because it will station retrograde in Leo in August. And So Mercury is the mind, the thought process, communication, etc., etc. Um, and when Mercury makes an aspect to Vesta, there's something here that gets highlighted around themes of holding space, of taking up space, of shining your vibrance, shining your light forward. Vesta is a symbol of the center of the home, the hearth, the center of the space, and the center. I think in some ways we could think of it psychologically as the center of the self, as another subtle aspect of the sun, another subtle symbol that is very sun-like in a way. Whereas the sun is a symbol of our conscious focus and our ego and our identity, Vesta is more internal. Vesta is more like that well that we connect into to reconnect with our own energy. Vesta is a symbol of the private experiences that we have within ourself that are rejuvenating. And so Mercury Vesta here, it feels to me as though there's something about connecting in with your own internal experience, with maybe naming something within yourself about your experience. Mercury is very much about myths and stories and meaning making. And we can think of Mercury Vesta as maybe doing a little work on the story that we tell ourselves about things, about the world, or I think more immediately, the story that we tell ourselves about our life and who we are and what's happening to us. So there's something here that might come up that just, yeah, wants a little attention. It could be simply be uh, your self talk and your internal dialogue, which is very Mercury. There's something here that wants to be nourished around Mercury, that wants to be tended to. Vesta is very much about tending to things on a consistent basis. And then the last part of the astrology this week is that the planet Neptune will station retrograde. So, Neptune, like the other outer planets, is retrograde for about half of the year. So, its retrograde in itself is not dramatic, is not necessarily striking, but it does mean that Neptune will be moving backwards through the zodiac. And because it's in the early degrees of Aries, it tells us that Neptune will eventually retrograde back into the sign of Pisces. So we have a long while before that happens, but I wanted to name this because I want you to sort of be keeping in mind that later this year, Neptune and Saturn, for that matter, will move back into Pisces. And that happens, let's see, when does that happen? Neptune will shift into Pisces from October of 2025 until January of 2026. So later this year. So we're not there yet. We're going to talk more about it when it gets there. And this is signaling this process of Neptune getting ready to go back to this place in the chart, this place in the zodiac, where there's maybe some wrapping up, tying up of loose ends, and drawing back to things that came up in 2024 and 2023, particularly around your experience of altered states of consciousness, spirituality, and your unconscious material, and maybe even your connection in with collective themes. Neptune being a symbol of the collective unconscious. And so that's very background energy. It's not super striking, but again, I did want to name it just to kind of have it in your awareness for what is happening in the astrology. Okay, so I have some reflection questions for you, and then we'll pull some tarot cards. As always, so curious to, um, I want to, I want to create some space here for you to take a moment to reflect on how this is sitting with you, what's coming up for you as you're hearing this, and what does this what does this bring up for you in connection to your own life and what your experience is right now? And okay, so reflection questions. Number one, where are you being called to diverge from what's typical? So this could be typical for you, typical for your community, typical for your family, whatever it is. Where, and it might be subtle, I don't know. It might be subtle, it might be striking. Um, Even if you cannot diverge, there's so much power in naming what it is that is wanting to be expressed from you. And this is really connecting into that Venus-Uranus. Reflection question number two, in what spaces can you exist most authentically? So, where or with whom can you exist most authentically? And we know that you can exist authentically, typically, because you feel relaxed, at ease, and there is a minimal amount of fear that you may do the wrong thing or um, be mocked or teased or harmed in an even stronger case. And yeah, I'm curious in what spaces or with whom can you exist most authentically? And for some folks, that may be in your own home by yourself or in your room by yourself. And that's okay. We're identifying where Uranus and Venus Uranus can exist in a most fully unfurled way. Okay, number three, how can you release tension, anxiety, or unnecessary holding? And this, for me, is really connecting into the aspect of the sun and the moon to Ceres, because I'm feeling into Ceres as psychologically, somatically, this quality of possible tension, hanging on to, clinging. And clinging might be even too strong. I think I'm wanting to get into how can you soften where there is unnecessary or even harmful or detrimental holding or anxiety. And of course, we all do this. This is a survival instinct, and it is something that your psyche is doing to try to protect you. And also, we know that when we have chronic holding or chronic tension or chronic dysregulation, that has an impact on our bodies, our minds, our souls, our emotions that is not the most life-giving. And so, how can you maybe possibly soften or release some tension or anxiety or unnecessary holding? Okay. So, I invite you to, if you're not already, get into a space where you can feel relaxed and like you're in your own energy field. If you like, you can close your eyes or focus on something in front of you that feels soothing. You may wish to imagine that you could imagine a beautiful sphere of light around you. This light can be any color that feels good for you right now. And this light is vibrant, protective, and encircles your whole body. You may wish to invite in the presence of your spiritual guidance team, ancestors, whoever or whatever is that protective guiding presence for you. Ask that they are here with you to protect you, to help you, and to communicate with you in a way that you can easily understand. Good. And then connect in with your heart space at the center of your chest. And in this place, maybe a curious wondering arises for you. Maybe there's a particular question or scenario, or maybe it's just wanting guidance from your heart. Okay. So I'm picking 3 cards as usual. If you like, you can pick a card between 1 and 3, and then that card will be special to you. Okay. So first card is the Knight of Cups. And I love this card in this deck. This is the Tarot of Spells and Potions. And in this deck, there's a person with super full, flowing, wavy red hair. And they're wearing this like very voluminous green dress. And they're cuddling a fox and a cup. And what looks like maybe even like a little jug also. And it feels very sweet. So the knight typically is a very energetic, extroverted, excited kind of energy. The knight in tarot is often connected to taking action, to moving forward, particularly with enthusiasm. And it also, even if it's not quite that, it can simply be movement, doing like things are happening. And it can often be movement that feels rapid, that feels very excited, and even spontaneous. The knight to me developmentally feels like teenagery kind of energy, or maybe like early 20s kind of energy. It's like high on enthusiasm, but there's a quality to it where there's not necessarily a component of having had the literal life experience. Again, whether that's life experience or in a particular scenario, there's not the lived experience of something. And what is lacking in experience is made up for by enthusiasm. And this is the Knight of Cups. And so the Knight of Cups to me feels a bit slower and softer than some of the other knight suits. Cups being a symbol of relationships and emotions and intuition. And so there's an enlivening here, there's a quickening around relationships, intuition, emotional awareness. And I'm very curious about this. So this is the first card, and it sort of feels like there's something new emerging that's kind of exciting. Um, I also am wondering if there is a feeling of excitement, or maybe it's an intuitive message or something like that that is coming forward for you. It feels very like exciting but also sweet at the same time. And in this card, I'm sort of feeling the Venus-Uranus connection, where there is such a sense of sweetness and affection, but also excitement and like wondering too at the same time. There's definitely a sense of seeking something or being drawn towards something. So I'm going to look at the other cards and we'll maybe talk more about this. So the second card is the Ace of Wands. And I pulled this card reversed. In this deck, there is a person that is on a witch's broom, and it looks like they're just like shooting straight up into the sky, and they have a cat on their head. And so this card also feels very dynamic, very action oriented, right? The aces are the new beginning, the initiation, the planting of seeds. The aces tend to feel very new moon like in that there is something new that's beginning or that's coming about, and it needs to be fleshed out. It is just the little seedling of an idea or maybe an opportunity. And this being the Ace of Wands, there's something here around passion, enthusiasm, your drive, your determination. The wands are very much about like our enthusiasm for life. And that it's reversed, so a couple different things here. Um, it could be that you're rooting into your passion and your enthusiasm, and maybe there's something that you're beginning that you're wanting to like really commit to. I'm thinking that because in this case, reverse, the wand is sort of rooting down into the ground, and it's like, oh, like, yes, I'm gonna do this. That's kind of the feeling that I have with this. It could be that there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, and the direction is unknown, or the exact what is itness is unknown. There's more information that is is arising, that's going to come about. We may go back to that. Okay, second card is the Ace of Swords. And so I find this very intriguing. We have two aces. Both of them I pulled reversed. So we have Knight of Cups upright, Ace of Wands reversed, and then Ace of Swords also reversed. And then this deck, it's an image of a person who is sitting cross-legged on a little cloud, and they actually look quite cozy. They have long socks, and they're wearing a red-orange sort of hood, and they have green hair, and they have their hand, one of their hands is facing palm up, and there's a sword that's sort of like hovering above it. And then on the other side of them, there's this shamrock. So Ace of Swords, of course, okay, all of the things with aces still apply, this newness, this something beginning. And in this case, it is the swords, which is about the mind, the thought process, communication. Swords also have this quality of pruning, cutting things that are unnecessary being chopped away. Swords to me sort of feels boundary making in a way, where there is a clear line, there is a differentiation of things. And in this particular deck, I'm just really in this moment struck by the peaceful presence of this person who's sitting here, and they have this meditative quality about them, but they're not, their eyes are not closed, their eyes are open, and they're here, like they're fully in this moment, and there's this mystical quality to them in a way. And so this makes me think that there is something new here that is arising for you. And more literally, it could be a new idea, a new thought process, maybe some new information is coming to you. But it sort of feels like there is something that is arising from within you here that is going to continue to evolve and be elaborated on. And there is a call possibly to be in your own energy here, because in the traditional Rider Waite Smith deck, there's this landscape, and there's an image of a hand presenting a sword. So the sword appears as if it's just being handed out into midair. And in this imagery, it's really focused on the person sitting here, and the sword is arising from their palm in this mystical, almost telekinetic sort of way. And so there's something here possibly that is arising from you when you find your seat, when you find your center, when you find your own sense of clarity here. And so this gets into possibly what the reversal is. The reversal could very well be just like the Ace of Wands here. It could be that we don't quite know what it is that is new, that is coming, or there's something, there are other things that need to happen before we know what the Ace of Swords phenomena is. There are other things that you need to experience first that sort of create the lay the pathway, so to speak. And also, the reversal to me feels like it emphasizes the introspective quality here, taking reversals as a symbolic retrograde, a symbolic introspection, a symbolic turning the energy inward. And so, actually, okay, so I have some ideas here now that something clicked for me. So, the beginning of this reading is the Knight of Cups. So there's almost this, with the Knight of Cups, this pursuit of something. There's a draw towards something. There is a seeking or a pursuit or a draw around something that is relational or emotional or maybe spiritual, or there's an intuitive call towards something. And I think it's quite possible that this intuitive call is toward an aspect of yourself. And I'm saying that because both of these aces to me feel as though it's about you connecting in with your own energy. And there may be new things that are happening in your life that you're doing or calling forward, or et cetera, et cetera. But this to me feels as though there's something that you're connecting in within yourself, and there is an aspect of you that is coming forward, that is maybe coming more into consciousness or coming more into awareness, or a new way of being. There's something here that is an inside job, so to speak, that is an inside blossoming or flowering. And of course, when we have internal changes, when our energy or our mental emotional state changes, that impacts our external life. And to me, this is very internally oriented here. So there's something new that you're seeking, that is arising, and I'm very excited for you to go on this inward journey, which is what it feels like. I'm also really connecting in with that archetypal theme of the call, and the hero or the heroine's journey, which is this, there's an invitation that we can accept. And often that invitation involves self journeying, self exploration, and self curiosity. And then that has an impact on how we eventually move through the world. Okay, so that is your astrology for this week. I hope that this invoked something in you and was helpful for you throughout the week. I am wishing you a most safe and easeful week, and I'll see you soon. Bye.